Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile, Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
And thank you, Ray Hobbs. It is Peter Robbins, your host of Meanwhile Here on Earth. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, now in the present moment, or at some point in the future. We have an interesting show for you, but first I want to talk a little bit about an upcoming event that is very dear to the heart of all of us here at KUNX. And if I hit the right button, yes, it is the X-Con, the X conference, so to say, which is the center of the operation here. It's taking place October 11th to 13th in Springfield, Missouri. And please look on the KUNX page for all information about the conference. I am honored to be one of the speakers, although it will be virtual, but virtual is better than non-virtual. And we hope to see a lot of you there. So again, visit the KUNX Digital Broadcasting Empire website and get that information. And if you're remotely in the area and able, do please join us there. And my guest today is somebody who was on the show, I guess about a year ago, no longer, and whose second book, After They Came, it still sticks with me in many respects. Dan Harary was raised near Asbury Park, New Jersey, and is a man of many talents, very definitely. He is currently celebrating the 40th anniversary of his work in Hollywood as an entertainment industry publicist. He has owned and operated the boutique Asbury Public Relations Agency in Beverly Hills since 1996. He is the author of 4 books, which have hit Amazon within the past 2 years alone. Dan's first book was the popular 2022 Hollywood memoir, Flirting with Fame. A Hollywood publicist recalls 50 years of celebrity close encounters. Second book, After They Came, which I've just discussed, well, it discusses just that. He is the founder of an organization now called the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, the world's first organization uniting the UFO researchers and experiencers with Hollywood writers, producers, and directors. This is co-founded with Steve Bassett, who many of you know from, just being alive. During the summer of 2024, Dan's 2 newest books were published. My Paranormal Life, Supernatural Stories from a Hollywood Insider, and the other book that we'll go into very shortly. Dan Harary, welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth, my friend.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, I think I'll just title the last book, my other book, No, it's called Five, F-I-V-E, 5, a novella. It's a little baby. It's a little short story about a serial killer who gets reincarnated every 100 years. So I'm very proud of this. It's a good, do you remember the show? Do you remember Night Gallery? You remember?
Of course. Yeah, that was Rod Serling's, follow-up, of course.
Well, yeah. Well, we all loved Twilight Zone, of course, when we were little, and that was in black and white.
Still do.
Night Gallery came, I'm going to say, the early 70s. And
yes, I think you're right.
It was in color. I was in junior high school and high school, and I watched it religiously. Scary show. But one of the episodes, Peter, I remember really well was called the Sin Eater. Do you remember that one? It was called the Sin Eater, which I'd never heard of.
If you describe it, I might remember it.
I want to say it was who was the star of the Waltons with with the mole on his cheek? What's the name of that?
John Boy.
John Boy. Yeah, you know who I mean. We'll think of it, right? In that,
Richard. Richard.
I want to say Richard Walton.
He's a wonderful actor. Yeah. Continuing on.
We know, you know who I mean, but I think it was him. He was a young kid. In that episode called the Sin Eater, there's this old
Richard Earl Thomas.
Thank you,
Richard Thomas.
Richard Thomas.
That's right. I think it was him. He was probably about 14 at the time, maybe. Anyway, the episode is this heinous old man in a bed, and in like the 1890s in the UK, and Richard Thomas was the Sin Eater, and they really had Sin Eaters across the UK in the late 1800s. It would be a poor kid who's like starving to death, and they would bring in a kid to sit and listen to someone who's dying on their deathbed, literally on their deathbed, so they can confess all their sins. Brian, see, I remember the Sin Eater. So the person comes in. It's usually a young person who's like a pauper, and listens to this rich person spill their guts. I killed this person. I raped this person. I was mean to my mother. Then they die, and then the kid gets to eat a buffet.
Oh gosh, what an idea!
I remember that story. So my book 5, the first scene is a young kid named Fievel Vados. His nickname is Five, and he lives in 1880s London. And he is essentially the captive of this mean ogre guy who, it turns out, killed his parents, but he doesn't know that until he's on his deathbed, and the kid is eating the sins. And among the sins, the guy tells me, "Oh, by the way, I killed your parents." So anyway, I don't know where that came from, but that's my book 5. It just came.
It's a perfect note to start our show on. Your life has been centered around the entertainment industry in so many respects, and one book that we didn't mention was one that I thought took great courage. I really appreciated what you shared with us in this book.
I don't talk about that one, so no? I appreciate that.
No, very much so. Again, your best known book, and so many wonderful endorsements of the book. Your Paranormal Life, a cover that I absolutely adored the moment I saw it, and that's the life you're living. Yes. Of course, Flirting with Fame. And
that's my funny book. Yeah, that's my funny book. I love that one.
Yes. Well, it is great fun. And again, when I say I'd like to go back, sort of the beginning, when you were last a guest, I was most interested in your relationship with your dad, who he was growing up, the event that kind of joined you even more so, and how, well, the impact of it resonates in, so much of what you're doing, living your life right now. It's a story for screenplay in itself, I think.
Okay. That's very sweet and very kind of you, and I appreciate it. I have written a screenplay for After They Came, by the way, and it is with a production company as we speak. I'm waiting to hear back what they think. But After They Came is, it's a science fiction novel about. It's science fiction. It's based. The premise is 2 benevolent aliens come to Earth in the near future, 2037, and to save mankind, solve all of the humanity's problems. And they work through this schmucky loser of a guy on page 1. This guy turned 70. He hates his life. Everything went wrong for him in his entire life. So on page 1, it's his 70th birthday. He lives in LA. He's down and out. All he wants to do is be dead. So he swims out to sea. And of course, I have it in Malibu. So he swims out to sea in Malibu. And here's a side story. In the 80s, I was the publicist for the New Gidget TV show.
Oh my gosh.
And Peter, this is my job for 2 years, was to go to Malibu Beach and hang out with girls in bikinis and talk to them. That was my job for 2 years. That was my job, to go to Malibu and talk to girls in bikinis. Okay, so I've had some pretty good jobs. That was
nothing to say. Continue on.
That was one of the best. Anyway, so this guy swims out. This guy swims out to sea, and as he's drowning on his 70th birthday,
right,
a huge UFO comes out of the Pacific Ocean, enormous,
as they do,
and beams him on board, saves him from drowning. And then this craft slowly hovers over all of Los Angeles. It winds up hovering over Dodger Stadium, and two magnificent Pleiadian, tall white Pleiadians, a man and a woman, 7 feet tall, white hair. They beam down slowly to second base, and all the media and ambulances and fire trucks and police and soldiers with guns. It's a tribute to the day the Earth stood still, really.
Yeah.
And the aliens say, people of Earth, don't be afraid, and it's all telepathy. They don't even speak like with their mouths. Don't be afraid. We're here. We love you. Everything's cool. We have a relationship with this guy, and then they lower this guy who was drowning. They lower him, and they said, we just saved this guy's life. He was drowning. We saved his life. We have a relationship with this guy. We will solve all of your problems, people of Earth,
Through him.
But you have to work through him. This is our guy.
Life changes sometimes in a hurry.
So, right. So this is like on the first 6 pages of the book.
Pretty much, yeah.
Honestly, and I'm not bragging, but everyone says, Dan, the beginning of your book is just mind-boggling.
Well, I'm with them. I thought it was great fun. And we learn, of course, that we're so conditioned to think about from this moment on, it's going to be the classic Twilight Zone episode.
Kill us or eat us. Yeah.
To serve man, of course.
Right.
But it isn't. They're really here to help us, and they're nice, and they're good.
Well, let me tell you about that. So the first draft of the book, Peter, they were nice and kind all the way through. And I thought, wow. And I actually thought when I submitted it to my publisher, I'm like, finally a book, exactly what you just said, man. The aliens come not to kill us and not to eat us.
And they not only help us, they keep helping us.
And my publisher called me, Dan, where's the conflict?
Thank you. That was my issue. I like conflict.
Well, I said to him, I said, Stephen, can't I just have a book about benevolent aliens? And he goes, Dan, there's no conflict. There's no drama. Everything's unicorns and rainbow. So Peter, I had to shove in the evil draconians. I had to shove in the evil draconians.
They weren't evil enough for me, but they were evil.
They were creepy. They were sort of creepy and mean. I'm such a lighthearted person.
They also took out a good amount of some of my favorite real estate on Manhattan Island. I am still pissed about that. And then some logistics that you could tell you weren't a New Yorker because you didn't know where the pieces were going to fall, that kind of thing. Otherwise, Dan, there was something.
I had to shove that in. The publisher said, I'm not going to publish it without that, Peter. So I had to shove that part in.
Something important that really moved me as I kind of drilled deeper in our conversation interview. I mean, I really was wondering, when is there going to be conflict and why isn't there? And what came out of that was you talking about the chronic depression you had been suffering for something like 20 years, and then going on the right med and your life changing overnight, and a manifestation of that beginning to work on this book almost immediately. I got it. And I was very moved by that.
You're a little bit conflating some things. You're a little bit conflated. I had clinical depression undiagnosed from the age of 15 to the age of 40. And it ran in my mother's family. I never knew I had it. No one ever told me I had it. My 40th birthday came along. I woke up. I look in the mirror. I was incapable of smiling. And I thought to myself, you're 40 years old. You're healthy. You have 2 children that you love. You have a good job. You have girlfriends here and there. You have a lot of friends and people that love you. Yeah. Dan, why can't you smile? That's what I thought to myself during the week of my 40th birthday. Dan, why can't you smile? So, Peter, this is all true, man. I know this is what year is this? 1996. I got a phone book, a physical phone book. I looked up psychiatrists. I went to a random psychiatrist in Woodland Hills, California. A random guy just walked in the door. He goes, "Why are you here?" And for an hour, I told him, I was suicidal when I was 18. All I wanted to do was kill myself. I've been depressed every day of my life for 25 years. And I've accomplished all these things and this, that. And the guy looked at me. He leaned forward. He goes, Dan, you're you are a remarkable person. Can I shake your hand? I go, why?
Wow.
I go, why?
You're still alive.
He goes, you are like a diabetic that never had insulin. He goes, I don't know how you've lasted this long. I don't know how you've accomplished all that you've accomplished without medication.
Yeah.
I go, really? And honest to God, Peter, I didn't know I had depression. I didn't even know I had it.
You didn't have anything to compare it to if it's your family's reflective traits.
If no one tells you that your mother, your aunt, your uncles, your grandmother, that all these people had, if no one ever tells you this in your life,
it's normal.
It's normal. So anyway, this guy gave me a prescription for liquid Prozac. I only take like 4 milligrams. All I take. He goes, here. I take liquid Prozac. I'm going to say 4 or 5 days, and I wake up and I look in the mirror, Peter. I'm smiling, and the negative tape that was in my head for 24. Dan, you suck. You're no good. You're ugly. You're stupid. You're a loser. Every single day for 25 years, the tape no longer was playing.
I don't think I was overstating it, Dan. It's pretty remarkable, my friend.
But as soon as the tape, thank you. As soon as the tape ended, it was the week I turned 40. Okay, and now I have a story from my paranormal life that I can share with you. The week I turned 40, I became undepressed. Right, I became undepressed for the first time since I was a little kid.
I've never heard that phrase, but it's perfect. Keep going.
I think I invented undepressed. I became undepressed. At the time, I was working for a little Napoleonic bastard of a boss who was a real prick. He was horrible, man. And I had worked for him for 7.5 years. I brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars into his company, for which this is a big, major Hollywood PR firm, for which I was getting a whopping 10% of my own money. So I was giving him hundreds of thousands, and I was getting 10%, okay, for 7.5 years. So I turned 40. The Prozac kicked in. He wanted me to go to a new business meeting. It's right up the street from where I live. Four Seasons Hotel, Beverly Hills. Very nice hotel, of course.
Nice neighborhood.
I live in Beverly Hills. I'm not rich, but I do live in Beverly Hills. So anyway, so my boss is there, I'm there, and then these two men, very powerful TV producers were there, and we're sitting there at the Four Seasons Hotel in the restaurant, and my boss at the time is telling them how great he is and what a genius he is and how successful he is and why these two producers, should hire him to be their publicist. And I'm sitting there, Peter, taking little notes with my little suit and tie and being just miserable. And I'm thinking to myself, why? I just turned 40. Why do I work for this bastard who I can't stomach? Why am I working for this guy? I hate this guy. Okay. Now I swear to God on my daughter's life, the following story is true. I swear to you. I'm sitting there being miserable, but undepressed. Okay. The chandelier, I swear to God, the chandelier at the Four Seasons Hotel above my head to the left. Dan, start your own business. I swear on my daughter's life. The chandelier said to me, Dan, start your own business. That loud in my ears, that loud. Peter, I went like this. I went, what? I looked at Dan, what? And then I turn my head and then I look at my boss. I start laughing. I stand up and I said, I have to go home now. In the middle of a meeting. He goes, what's going on? I go, I have to go. I stood up. I left this guy in the middle of a meeting. I went home. I called every client that I had that was my client that was paying him so I could get my whopping 10%, right? I called all of them. Every single one of them said, Dan, wherever you go, I go. I went from making 80 grand a year to making $500,000 a year because the chandelier told me, I swear to God, start your own. 3 months later, I had my own multi-million-dollar business.
You accredit this to the chandelier as opposed to just a thought that occurred to you or some random inspiration in your head?
I'm clairaudient. I've heard things in my ears. Oh, it's always in my right ear, always, except the chandelier was the exception.
Fair enough.
Peter, you know how God spoke unto Moses at Mount Sinai? Right?
Not personally, but I've read about it.
We all know the story. God spoke unto Moses. Like I always think unto, Moses, here's a pizza. I'm speaking unto you. I swear the chandelier spoke unto me now. Was it God? Was it
God speaking through a chandelier, or
an angelic? Listen, honest to God,
intermediary?
I've been clairvoyant since the age of 10. I've had it's always a male voice, and it's always in my right ear. I would say at least a dozen times, and everything that it ever told me came true. Every single thing that ever told me in my right ear came true.
Whoa.
But the chandelier, Peter, was, and I've told this story all over the world, and some people go, Dan, they were crystals in the chandelier. Yeah, I go, yeah, they were crystals. So they said, whatever my paranormal thing is, right, in the universe, it probably, like my being miserable at that meeting probably shot into the crystals, and the crystals gave me a voice, because it was loud, Peter. It was loud as I'm talking to you right now. And I heard it. I heard it in my ears. They didn't. The other three men didn't hear it, obviously. It was a message just to me. Changed my life. It totally changed my life.
And we can assume, like, the next day or so, you officially gave notice at your previous company.
Here's what happened. I went home that night and called all my clients and realized I have $500,000 sitting in my hands. That same night. The next day, I went to one of my clients and I said, hey, I'm thinking about, maybe working from home. He goes, no, I'm your partner. I'm giving you a building, a phone system, an accountant, a lawyer, and a computer system in Hollywood. You'll take my building. So the next morning, Peter, I had a building in Hollywood down the street from the Hollywood sign.
And this is a partner that things have remained amicable, and you've worked together?
He was my partner for the first 5 years, and then I bought him out.
Okay, great.
But the point is, from the chandelier, a few hours later, I had $500,000 in my hand. The next morning, I had a building. I had a building in Hollywood, and then a few weeks after that, I had a staff of 6 people. I had an office in New York. You don't understand. It was winning the PR lottery. It could never have happened again. I gave notice 3 months later because I had to. Do you ever see the movie The Firm?
Sure.
Tom Cruise, The Firm.
Absolutely, I read the book.
Okay, so Tom Cruise is a lawyer for the mob, right? And he finds out he's a lawyer for the mob. He doesn't want to be. So he spends weeks and nights and weeks Xeroxing, right? Xeroxing in secret. All this, him and Holly Hunter, this material. So in case the mob wants to kill him, he says, look, I like you guys, but if something happens to me, all of your secrets go into the New York Times. They go, okay, we hear you.
Have a nice day.
So it took me 3 months to cover my ass. I Xeroxed everything. I lined up everything. I had stationary business cards, logo, a website. I mean, I had to. So by the time I gave notice, I walked into my own $500,000 company the next day. And then I made a couple million over the next few years. It was a gift, literally from a chandelier. It was a gift.
Capitalism at its most paranormal.
I think I invented that. And it's funny. Brian C. says, Dan, lead me to your chandelier. People have said to me, Dan, where's that chandelier? It's at the Four Seasons Hotel in Beverly Hills. It's my good luck. It's a good luck. It's still there. I saw it the other day. It's still there. Dan,
let's go back to when you were a kid. Tell us about your dad. He was a very special guy, and what he did, I mean, it still resonates in you.
My dad's passing changed my life. My dad's passing in 2017 redirected my life to the point of, Peter, I never would have met wonderful people like you and Race and Margie and
so many others.
And Nick Pope and Dolan and Paul Hynek and Katie Page and Earl Grey Anderson and every single person that you could think of, Whitley Strieber and Travis Schwab. I mean, everybody. I've met everybody. Why? Because my dad passed away. Now we can get to that story. When I was 13,
right,
in March, it was March. I remember the month because that night my father took me to buy the new Jimi Hendrix Band of Gypsies album. So that's how I remember the month. It was March 1970. I was 13 and a half years old. And my dad picked me up one afternoon from school in his car. We're driving home on my suburban New Jersey street. I'm going to say it was 3:00 in the afternoon, sunny day. My dad's driving me home. I'm in the passenger seat. We're talking about probably, Dad, I want to buy the new Jimi Hendrix album. And I look through the windshield and there's a huge silver V, like Victor, huge silver V craft hovering over my father's car. Wow. Silently, huge silver, shiny silver.
What time of day?
3 o'clock, 3:30.
Continue.
400 feet above us. I mean, low, very low. And just above the car. And it was following our car. And I said, and I'm in the seat. I go, Dad, there's a UFO above our car. Dad, stop the car. Dad, stop the car. He stopped the car. He and I got out. We stood in front of this car.
And describe where you were, the kind of terrain.
The most suburban New Jersey neighborhood you ever saw in your life. Suburban New Jersey street with nice houses and trees. Yeah. Middle class all the way. I think we were in front of one of my best friends. His name was Barry. One of his houses. I think we were in front of his house. And I'm jumping up and down and I'm going, Dad, look, isn't this cool? Dad, there's a UFO. I think I said, look, it's like Star Trek, Dad. Star Trek was a new TV show in 1970, right?
I think
or maybe it had.
67 was when the first episodes. Yeah, but close enough.
It had been in the recent past that I think, Peter, and I can't really swear, but
sure.
I think I said, Dad, Star Trek, Dad, it's Star Trek. Look, and Peter, and I'm literally like this, jumping up, because I remember I'm jumping up and down. My father looked at it like,
wow.
Couldn't care less. Then he's looking at his car. Yeah, I should get my car washed. Then he's looking at his watch. He's looking at his shoes. He's looking at the craft. No things. Wasn't afraid. He wasn't scared. He wasn't happy. He wasn't thrilled or enthralled.
He wasn't surprised.
Peter, zero reaction. Zero. Now, if you or me were there, we'd be dancing the horror. We'd be high-fiving. We'd be making love in the street with cameras, right? I'm doing Richard Lewis. But my father, bored to tears, bored. Okay, and that's the whole story that's coming up in 2 minutes from now. So after a couple of minutes, now this craft, no propellers, no sound, no smoke, just this enormous, it's like seeing a pyramid of Egypt above your father's car. It just didn't belong. It just didn't belong. It was an anomaly.
Any kind of size estimate based on it being, 400 feet or so up?
My best guess, which is what I've been saying, is, someone says, this is the voice in the chandelier of my star family. But it was whoever it was, man, I'm very grateful, Brian. I think, Peter, each wing was like the size of 2 school buses, I would say. So like a V is 2 wings.
Yeah.
Right? Now it had
silvery in appearance.
Very, very shiny, bright silver, sharp tips. Each of the 3 ends of the V had sharp, I remember, pointy tips.
Gosh.
Okay, 2 school buses. It was big. Okay, 2 minutes, right? 2 minutes. My dad, only thing he said to me, he looks down at me, he goes, "Come on, kid, let's go home." That's what he said to me. It's the only words he said to me. "Come on, kid." Guys, any other human on the planet would have said, "This is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Oh my God, aliens really do exist." Anyone else, but my father couldn't care less. I think absolutely bored to tears. Okay, that's the whole story. Get in the car, we drive home, and I just remembered this, Peter, recently. As we're driving home, the craft followed the car for maybe another block. It hovered over it came with us for another block, and then it went quickly down the neighborhood and then it went very fast and vanished.
Yeah.
Okay. Get to my house, March 1970, rotary telephone. We did not have a push button phone. Where I go in the kitchen, I call the Asbury Park Press, my hometown newspaper. And this is the conversation. "Hi, my name is Danny. I'm 13. I just saw a UFO with my father." And the lady said, "Sonny, I can't talk to you right now. We're getting hundreds of phone calls about this. I have to go. I'm very sorry. I got to go." And the lady hung up. I remember clear as day. That's exactly what we're getting, hundreds of phone calls about this. Okay. So she hung up on me. Peter, I checked the paper every day for that next week. No article ever written. Okay, no. Okay. Now, a couple of things. My father and I never, ever, and now we're 7 years past his dying day, never, ever discussed that event, ever. We never once discussed it, ever. Not when we got home, not the next day, not 30 years later. Never once. Okay, that's number one.
Well, that's not uncommon when situations like this, but still, it's the strangest thing in the world when it's happening.
Of course. Number two, and just recently, I'm thinking, I never told my mother or my two younger brothers or any of my friends. I never told anyone. Yeah. And then I go, why? And I've been doing this as a lecture recently. Why? Well, I just had gotten my drum set for my bar mitzvah, and I'm in rock and roll bands, man.
You don't want to embarrass yourself by being a flying saucer kind of person.
Well, my life, in reference to the Jimi Hendrix album, my life revolved around rock and roll music. I was a drummer in bands. All my friends were musicians, and we played in bands and chased girls. We weren't thinking aliens and UFOs, man. We're thinking, when's our next gig for our little band? Way to go. Okay, so for the next, and this is all true, man, for the next 47 years, I completely forgot 47 years that event happened. Okay. Now we come to the part that changed my life. Now we're in April 2017, 47 years later from the UFO sighting. My dad passed away. He died in Florida. He had his second wife. He died a very bad death. He had stage 4 cancer and total Alzheimer's. He had no idea the last 2 years of his life who he was. He didn't know who he was. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know who his wife was. It was the saddest thing. Yeah. It's hard. Last time I saw him, I hugged him and kissed him. I said, "Thank you, Dad, for being my father." He goes, "I'm your father? Isn't that nice?" He didn't know who I was. Okay, anyway. So he dies in Florida. I live in Los Angeles. 3 days after my father died, I'm still kind of in shock. I went to Junior's Deli in Los Angeles. It's near UCLA, to get a pastrami sandwich, because my dad and I used to go there when he visited to get a pastrami sandwich. I went to get a pastrami sandwich in my father's honor and to mourn my father. That's why I went to this deli. Okay.
That's Junior's?
It's not there anymore. It's long.
Oh, yeah. Same for the one on Flatbush Avenue that I used to go to when I was in art school. Continue.
I wonder if it was, well, my Junior's was a family-owned business. They may have been related, perhaps. The owners died, so then it went down. It's gone. Okay, I'm at Junior's 3 days after my father dies, 47 years after the event. I order my pastrami sandwich, and everything I'm about to tell you is true. The waiter walks away. I'm sitting there at the table thinking, God, I'm really going to miss my father, man. I really love that guy. I'm just sitting there thinking about my father. A beam of light or a beam of energy from above, the sky, the ceiling, God, the universe, heaven, a beam shot into my head hard like this. Bang, into my head, hard, and through my eyes and my brain. And every time I tell this story, it's amazing to me still. Projected in the air, 6, 8 inches in front of my face, projected, color, 3D, hologram, home movie with audio of the 1970 UFO sighting that I had with my father. It's playing in a deli in the year 2017. It's playing in the air. I'm looking at this, Peter, and it's like I'm looking at you. I swear to you, it's like I'm looking at you. I'm watching this home movie. Now, people have said to me, Dan, it was a memory or a flashback or something. It wasn't, Peter, because I'm in the movie. My little 13-year-old self. It's like God's cameraman was behind my father's car. So in my mind, it's like God had a cameraman. Then there's my father's car. Then me and my dad were in front of the car. And then this V is hovering. So in this little home movie that I'm watching, I'm jumping up and down. And I'm saying, Dad, look, it's a UFO. I'm saying it to my dad, just like I remembered. And I'm like, holy S, I remember that, right? This time, my father looks down at me, winks at me. And then he says, come on, kid, let's go home. Okay, now this little movie dissipates, Peter. It's just like pixelated, and then vanished. Now I'm shaking, and my heart is pounding, my hands are shaking.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that might be the most remarkable moment of my life. Then, remember I told you earlier, I'm clairaudient. In my right, and it's always my right ear except for the chandelier. In the right ear, get a pen, get a pen, get a pen, you need a pen, you need a pen, get a pen, get a pen, get a pen. I asked the waiter for a pen, put it in my hand. There's a paper placemat on the deli table. Peter, I did automatic writing. I did not write the following. My hand wrote the following. Write a book about benevolent aliens. Lead character's father, I love this one. Lead character's father knew about UFOs. Then the third thing I wrote was capital A, capital T, capital C. My hand stopped moving. I put the pen down. I'm holding up this paper, and I'm thinking, what the hell is happening here? What is happening to me now? Really, what's going on? And I'm staring. And after a few minutes, I came up with ATC. It was after they came. I'm like, well, I guess I have to write a book. I went to get a deli sandwich. I came out with a book. I came home with a book. Literally, I came home with a book. The next 8 months, I wrote after they came, night and day. I based the lead character on myself, and I based the lead character's father who knew about UFOs on my father.
That's right.
And then after the deli, I researched my father, and that's when I found out who he was, because nobody knew who he was before that. Okay. First thing I did was I called my mother. Now, in a few days, I will be at my mother's 90th birthday party on Saturday this week. Thank you. This Saturday, I will be with my mother on her 90th birthday party.
Wonderful.
So this is 2017, 2018.
Right.
I called my mother. Now, my dad, here's what we knew about my dad, and then I'm going to tell you what we never knew. My dad was an electronics engineer and a physicist for the U.S. Army from 1951 to 1996 at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, Army base. Okay, of course we knew that. We knew that. The only thing my dad ever said to us was, I invented missile systems and radar systems. So we could, and then the only thing he ever said really was, I helped America win the Cold War. Daddy, what do you do for a living? When I'm 7, Daddy, I helped America win the Cold War. Oh, that's all he ever said, man. That's all he ever said. Nothing else ever. Okay. So now my deli event happens. I call my mother. I go, Mom, did Dad ever talk about UFOs? You were with him. My mother was his first wife. They were together, I think, 28 years. I said, did Dad ever talk about UFOs, Mom? My mother said, and this is Peter, this is a story I'd never heard before.
Yeah.
She said, in the early 50s, they took your father deep into the vaults. She kept saying deep into the vaults at Fort Monmouth Army Base. And they showed your father something above top secret. And your father came home that night. He was pale and shaking and very, very nervous. And my mother said, honey, what's wrong? And my father said to my mother, I saw something today in the vaults that it's above top secret, and I can never tell you or anyone about it as long as I live. And Peter, my father never told her or me or my brothers or his friends or his second wife. He never told anyone. He died with that secret.
Good soldier.
Now, and I love this, the Jackie Gleason, Richard Nixon story.
Very well.
Homestead Air Force Base, right?
That's right.
1973. I'll just do it quickly because every time I tell that story.
Well, some people aren't familiar with it, so do tell it.
Every time I tell my dad's story about, I saw something I can never tell you, I immediately think of Jackie Gleason, the funniest man, one of the funniest men who ever lived.
Yeah. He
was very, very good friends with Richard Nixon.
Very much so.
They played golf together in Florida for years and years.
Billiards too.
In 1973, Jackie Gleason and Richard Nixon were playing golf on a tournament in Florida. At the end of the tournament, And Nixon's president at the time. Nixon says to Jackie, "Hey, Jackie, you want to see something really cool?
Yeah.
You want to see something really cool that'll blow your mind?" And
Most
and
of us
Jackie,
take this story very seriously, I might want to add.
I've read this story and seen it in documentaries. I don't know how many countless times. I mean, it's either a legend or it really happened. But Nixon, the president, goes, "Jackie, you want to see something?" And Jackie goes, "Sure, of course I want to see something cool."
And folks should know that Gleason was not only interested in the subject of UFOs, he had an extraordinary observations, and he built his house in the shape of one. Plus, he was a real scholar. In his several thousand volume paranormal library, I think about half those books were UFO. And he took the subject very seriously. Continue on, Dan, please.
Yeah. It's too bad in that he didn't live to the modern day disclosure era. Jackie Gleason, he would have been, "Hey man, I know they're real," right? Anyway, so this is 1973. Nixon's president. So Nixon pulls up in his car, Jackie Gleason's house. They go, "Hey Jackie, get in the car." Nixon's the president of the United States. He's in his personal car. There's no police escort. There's no motorcade. There's no protection. It's two men. It's two guys like going out for a beer. It's the president of the United States and the most famous comedian in the world, and they're in a car and they're driving. And Nixon pulls up to the gate at Homestead Air Force Base in Florida, and the guy at the gate says, "Can I help you?" I guess when he lowers the window, Sonny, open the gate. It's the president of the United States. Imagine that poor guard. "Mr. President," right? "Mr. President, I didn't know you were coming." "Sonny, open the gate." Of course. Now, what are you going to say? "No. Can I see some ID?" It's the president of the United States. So he opens the gate. They pull in. They go to a terminal, a hangar. And according to Jackie Gleason's wife, Marilyn,
who writes about this in her memoir.
Right. I think that's where it came from initially. Jackie Gleason saw 4 or 5 dead alien bodies in large tubes of formaldehyde, large tubes vertically suspended. And and Nixon goes, "See, I just wanted you to know extraterrestrial life is real. There's some aliens over there." And then according to Marilyn, Jackie Gleason didn't eat for like a week. He came home. He was crying. He was very upset and very sad and shaken to his core. The reason I bring that up is my mother said, "Danny, your father was never the same after that day." Whatever my father saw in the vaults, I think he saw a UFO. I think he saw a craft, because Fort Monmouth, New Jersey was one of the leading scientific electronics labs, probably in the world, for military purposes. They have thousands of patents that came out of Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, having to do with electronics and technology, etc. Okay, so that's one element. Also, after my father died, I looked through some old papers that I had of his, and I found something, Peter, I'd never seen before. 1985 profile of my father from his workplace. And it said, like, "This week, we profiled Jack Harary," and it lists my father's accomplishments. My father invented military drones with laser technology for the Army. I have it in writing. I have proof. My father invented, think about this, drones that incorporated laser technology in the 70s. Okay, that's that one. Then I called my mother back. "What else did Dad do?" "Well, your father spoke at the Pentagon all the time." Well, I remember that as a child. I didn't know what the Pentagon was. Once when I was a little kid in the car, my father said, "I wrote a report that JFK read." I go, "Really, Daddy? You know JFK?" No, I didn't read him. He read one of my reports. Okay. My mother said my father used to go to White Sands missile testing range all the time in the 60s and the 70s. Well, I never knew that. Peter, I don't hear you.
You were living in the Los Angeles area at this time?
No. We lived in New Jersey. My dad came out to California all the time from New Jersey.
Got it.
Okay, so my dad went to White Sands Missile all the time. Okay, now there's 2 more remarkable things, and then I'll give you the summary. In Richard Dolan's book, UFOs in the National Security State, Volume 1.
Yes.
In the back, there's a glossary of confirmed UFO sightings by radar above military installations from the 40s through the 90s. This is great, Peter. In 1951 and 1952, there were radar-confirmed UFOs above Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. My dad started there in 51. My dad worked in the radar branch. He had to have known.
He had to.
If he didn't see it with his own eyes, because let's say he wasn't outside at the time, he was in the radar branch. No one said, "Hey, Jack, there's a UFO." No one told my father. Of course they did. He was one of the top people in the radar branch. God. And now this last one is the best one of all. Last year, Stephen Greer gave a 3-hour talk at the Washington Press Club, Dr. Stephen Greer. And he says he has, I think he's something like 75 or 100 whistleblowers Stephen Greer has at the ready to testify before Congress once they pass the Schumer-Rounds bill. It should only happen. So these whistleblowers worked with ET technology. They worked with UFO craft. They worked with aliens dead and alive. And he says, they're coming out of the woodwork. We just need protection from Congress.
Yes.
During that 3-hour lecture by Stephen Greer, and it's I have UFO TV, which is a streaming network if you want to watch. It's probably on YouTube also. It's from June 2023. In there, Peter, Stephen Greer says, and by the way, I have a list of 145 U.S. military bases that I have proof of through my whistleblower network that worked on reverse engineering of UFO technology. So Greer then shows a slide, and I have a big TV. We all have a big TV. On my big TV, I freeze framed that moment of the press conference. It's 145 U.S. military bases that Greer has proof of that worked on reverse engineering of UFO technology. I went with my hand, Peter, down this chart. Number 51, Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. Well, when I saw that, I called my mother. I said, "Mom, I have proof now. I know Dad worked on reverse engineering of UFO technology. I know he did. There's so much anecdotal evidence, and now I have proof. He was there, Peter, for 45 years. He never worked on reverse engineering. He was there for 45 years. Of course he did."
Dan, what do you feel? When we use the word proof, it means different things to different people. In this case, what is it that Dr. Greer is offering as proof that you feel you could take to court?
Oh, well, that's a great question. Well, again, and I believe enough anecdotal evidence would persuade a jury. Okay, so let's review all the facts. Let's just big picture review all the facts. My father and I saw an incredible UFO together.
Yeah.
That he had no reaction to. And I left this out. Last year, I got an email from a guy in New Jersey. He said, "Dan, I just heard you on George Norrie." He goes, "My 3 older siblings saw the Silver V that you saw in March 1970.
Oh my goodness.
The next town over from where you live, Dan, and their whole lives, my siblings thought they were crazy. You're the first person that ever validated their story." Okay. So number 1, my father and I saw an incredible UFO. Number 2, I put my mother on the stand, and she testified. He saw something above top secret in the 50s at the Army base. Number 3, Dolan's UFO sightings on radar. 4, Stephen Greer's whistleblower network that can prove that Fort Monmouth was one of those top places. 5 is the profile, 1985 of profile. I have it. It's an orange piece of paper. I had it for 40 years. I didn't even know I had it. Let's profile Jack Harary, and it has all his accomplishments. And it basically says he invented drones for the Army. He was one of the top drone people probably in the world, and I have it in writing. You put all these things together to a jury, and would they say, "No, he didn't know anything about UFOs"? Of course he did. Of course he did. And that's why he winked at me. And now, Peter, right, get back to the deli. That little movie, there's 2 trains of thought about the little movie. I personally think my father sent that to me from heaven. I think that was from heaven, from my father. Why? He was saying, Danny, I could never tell you what I did for a living my whole life, but I'm dead now. I'm on the other side. I have no more NDAs with the government. Remember that UFO that we saw, Danny? I knew what that was. I think that was a gift from my father. And the book, I believe, after they came, a gift from my father. Steve Bassett thinks it was an extraterrestrial download that I got, so I would write the book. Either way, yeah. He said, Dan, that sounds like an ET download. It was either ET download or my father, or both, or God, or heaven, or Jesus. Whatever it was, Peter, it changed my life, because that book changed my life.
For me, hearing you say this, and I guess kind of wired through my life experiences to think differently, and having had a similarly profound repressed memory from childhood emerge full-blown in moments. In my case, considerably less time than you, 14 or so years, but fully formed. And the way I've always described it is it just started to run through my head from beginning to end like a tape loop, and it was in full color. But for me, it was a matter of, memories of traumatic events are released, I guess, for combinations of reasons, but certainly a key one would be that we, in our more mature form, are ready to deal with it. So I see it more pragmatically, but it doesn't really matter. It happened, and the results were the results, and life-changing, and a remarkable true story. Also, I mean, just learning about your father in this kind of converse manner and hooking it up to this wonderfully innocent, kind of jubilant, bonding moment of childhood, innocent kid. It's this thing, this huge, you'll never be the same after this. And appraising, his reaction, and then kind of that sort of jocular, tough guy but affectionate, in the car kid. It's incredibly moving, and it kind of comes full circle in your recollection. I think it's an amazing story, just amazing, Dan.
That's really sweet, man. That's really sweet. You're making me a little teary, actually. Listen, I was his oldest son. He and I were very close.
Yeah.
He loved all three of his sons equally. I was the oldest, so I knew him the longest.
Yep.
After he died, Peter, he came into my bedroom 3 times. This is after this deli moment. Okay. He came to, I'll tell you, and these are all in my book, My Paranormal Life. A week after, this is 5 days after he died. I'll do this quickly. 5 days after my father died, I was in Silicon Valley for a client business meeting, and they put me up in a hotel up in Silicon Valley after the meeting. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm at this hotel in Silicon Valley, fast asleep. My bed started to shake. Under the box spring of my bed and the frame of my bed at the hotel, Peter, started to shake and rumble back and forth. I thought it was an earthquake. I thought we was having an earthquake. I woke up because I heard from underneath the bed, and it was as loud as I heard from the chandelier. Danny, Jeannie changed my will. And I said, Dad? I turned on the light. I looked under the bed. I looked around. It was my father's voice. Danny, this loud. Danny, Jeannie changed my will. Okay. Peter, Jeannie was his second wife. No one on the earth called her Jeannie except him. Her name was Jean. Long story short, his second wife changed his will and his insurance while he had Alzheimer's.
Oh.
He told me from the grave. My brothers and I found out after he passed. We hired a lawyer. And it turns out that voice of my father, 5 days after he died, that was a true statement. She had changed his will. And that's how upset he was. He told me from the other side.
Oh, my gosh.
And I swear to God, that's a true story. And then once, a week after that, he turned the light on and off in my bedroom. And another time, he started playing my little drum set in my bedroom. And then that was it. And then I started to just dream about him but he came to my room 3 times.
Remarkable.
So if anyone doesn't believe in ghosts or spirits, let me tell you, once you experience it, you'll know. Then you know. Then you'll know. Sure.
Have a closing question, a non-paranormal question. Did you eat that pastrami sandwich?
Oh man, you know what? I inhaled it because I had to go home and write after they came. It's probably the fastest I ever ate a pastrami sandwich in my life.
Well, that's something to really.
I inhaled that, man. I inhaled that, mother. I did. Absolutely.
Believe it or not, our first hour is up. This is Peter Robbins with my very special guest, Dan Harary. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. Stay with us. We'll be back in 4 minutes.
This is Margie Kay, and I'd like to say thank you to all of our KUNX show hosts, staff, listeners, and viewers for making us number one on Paranormal Talk Radio.
While most near-death experiencers return to this plane of existence with alluring tales of their time spent in the presence of the divine, what happens when one crosses the veil into the afterlife, into the void? In the new book, Dying to Meet Them, Mindy Toutfest describes her journey to the afterlife after a devastating aneurysm, how a strange turn of events would lead her to spiritual growth, divine healing, UFO experiences, and a greater understanding of the universe. Get your copy of Dying to Meet Them today at Amazon.com or visit unxmedia.com for more information on this book and more amazing selections from Un-X Media Publishing at unxmedia.com. Ladies, we are a few weeks away from the 2024 X-Con in Springfield, Missouri, and you still have time to get tickets and join us for 2 nights and 3 days of speakers, workshops, paranormal investigations, vendors, and dance the night away at the Mad Hatter's Ball and Banquet. Be sure to bring your favorite Halloween costume for the ball and enter to win the costume contest. Come celebrate our 3rd year birthday and engage with amazing presenters like Tyler Kiwala, Micah Hanks, Dan Terry, Michelle Roos, and so many more, including keynote speaker Scott Nelson on the Ron Moorhead Bigfoot recordings, October the 11th through the 13th at the beautifully haunted Oasis Hotel and Event Center in Springfield, Missouri. Go to unxnetwork.com for tickets and details. That's unxnetwork.com.
And we are back. Peter Robbins. Our show is Meanwhile Here on Earth, and my guest is Dan Harary, and we are heading into our 2nd hour. And Dan, geez, we could choose from any of about a dozen ways to go at this moment. I'd like to know of any way we could go. What would you like to move into at this point relative to the books that you've written, experiences you've had, or just continue on this line of thinking?
I think the logical flow, Peter, would be 2 more stories from my paranormal life.
Let's do it.
Because the book came out in May. I've only done a few interviews about this book.
Oh, good.
I've had all these stories I wrote this book last summer, over about 3 or 4 months. I've had all these stories in my head forever, years and years. And I was thinking, After They Came is fiction, is sci-fi, which I love. That's my baby. After They Came is my baby. But my paranormal life, that's like, those are real meat and potatoes paranormal stories, right? These are like things that really did happen to me in my life. There are 2 stories in there that seem to be getting a lot of attention. The first one I'll do is chapter 1 of that book. And thank you so much for helping me promote it. It's a cool cover. You have to admit that. I really do like
it. Wonderfully lurid.
Wonderfully lurid. That's a good quote, man. I like that. Wonderfully lurid.
It's yours.
I might use that. Wonderfully lurid. The first chapter of that book, Peter, is called My Gargoyle. My Gargoyle. And then I'll tell you the story. And then I'll tell you the addendum to the story. When I was 5 years old, suburban New Jersey, normal neighborhood, 5 years old, 1961, I had two little girlfriends who lived across the street, sisters. I think one was 7 and one was 9. And they used to come knock on my mother's door and say, "Can Danny come out and play?" So, because I remember clearly playing with them. And they taught me how to climb fences and climb trees. That's what we did. We climbed things. Me and these two little girls, we climbed things. That was our relationship.
That's great.
One day, and I'm going to say this is probably summer of 61. One day we're walking down the street and they said, "Let's climb the billboard sign that's around the corner and a block away for the drugstore." There was a drugstore a block away in a little mini mall, down a corner and around a bend. In a parking lot, there was a drugstore. And there's a 30-foot tall billboard sign.
Damn.
It had to be 30 foot tall. It was a billboard sign. I don't know if it's 20, 25, 30, whatever feet it was, but it was a billboard sign. It had to be pretty big. So me and these two little girls, we went inside behind the signage.
Right.
I call it the lattice, the skeletal lattice. It was wooden beams. They were wooden beams, I remember. These two little girls start climbing up like Spider-Man. I mean, literally, they're like Spider-Man, Peter. They're climbing up, man, and they're going at it, and they're laughing, and I'm looking up. I'm 5. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to do this? And they could, "Come on, Daddy, it's fun. Come on, And when we girls, listen, girls have been my downfall my whole entire life. Why shouldn't it start at the age of 5? So they're going down. So I'm climbing up. Now, I remember climbing up slowly and thinking, "Oh, my God, this is scary, but this is kind of fun. Kind of scary, but kind of fun." And at some point, Peter, I remember as I'm climbing, both of my hands just slipped off and I remember clearly it's a wooden beam because I saw the grain in the wood.
Yeah.
My hands went like this. I don't know how high up I was. It had to be at least 10, 15 feet, I would think.
You
My
could
hands
kill
went like
yourself at that distance.
At 5, at the age of 5, maybe, right?
Yeah.
My hands came off the beam. I saw it happen. I thought, uh-oh. Then a remarkable thing happened. And I was climbing straight up. Now, when my hands came off the beam, I'm on my back, facing sky. My face is looking at the blue sky above. The girls are screaming at me, and I'm falling through the air, Peter, in slow motion. But I'm falling in slow motion. Honest to God. I'm like,
Well, that's the way it felt.
Slow. That's the way it felt. Very slowly. And I'm looking at these two. I see the girls like, they're yelling. Like he's going to die. He's going to die. Okay. Now we cut to, I have missing time. From floating in the air, I have missing time. And I'll interject. Last Saturday, I spent 3 hours with Yvonne Smith. She hypnotized me.
She's one of the most respected people in the world.
In the world. She hypnotized me it was 2 hours. We couldn't figure out the missing time part. We went, I was there. She put me there. And I said, "Yvonne, I'm floating, and it's frozen in time." We couldn't figure out the missing time. Anyway, so I'm floating in slow motion, cut to missing time. It could be 5 minutes. It could be an hour. I don't know. I wake up on a couch inside a house 2 blocks away from the sign in my neighborhood. I wake up on a couch. I'm lying prone on a couch. My eyes are closed. I remember when my eyes opened, the first thing I thought was, "Am I dead?" Honest to God, I remember thinking that. Am I dead? No one was home, Peter, in this house. It was a furnished house.
You don't know whose house?
I was never there before or since. I was in a stranger's house 2 blocks from the sign. No one is home. And I'm laying there like something out of the Addams Family, like a corpse from the Addams Family. So I open my eyes. I sit up. I'm clear as day. I remember, hello, is anyone here? Is anyone here? I'm 5. No one is home. No one is home. I look around, nothing. I stand up, turn to the right. I go to leave through the front screen door. Peter, there's a cryptid. Honest to God. There's a cryptid standing in front of the door in the living room. And I'm going to say it's 6 or 7 feet tall. So it's not human. The bottom half of this thing, had two legs. Bottom half looked like a donkey, it was like a donkey's legs with a donkey half body. The other half body looked like it had once had wings, because it was like a big, broad V back. And where the wings would have been attached, Peter, I saw bony stumps. There was a bony stump. My joke is God took a hedge clippers and cut off this thing's wings. So figure bony stumps, and it had the face, of a bull, and it's white chocolate color, as I remember it, white chocolate color. I look at this thing. This thing turns its head to look behind to see me, and it went like this. It snorted. Thing snorted at me. And I instantly thought, oh, that thing doesn't like me very much. Now, as an adult, I think what he was saying is, yeah, I saved your life, you little bastard, but I really didn't want to. That's how I see it now. But I remember clearly that he snorted at me. Then he turned his head, and then he went through the front door. Now, I don't remember if he opened the screen door and walked out or if he dissipated. I wish I could remember that, but I don't. Once he was out of the way, I thought, oh, I guess I should go home now. So I went through the screen door, down the steps. I look on the sidewalk. I look. We lived in a pink house, believe it or not. My mommy's pink house was 2 blocks down to the left. I said, oh, there's mommy's house, right? It's the only pink house on the... And so I knew where I was. And I walked home. And that's the entirety of the story. Now, I told my daughter that story last year. She's 34. For the first time ever. She goes, Dad, that was a gargoyle. Gargoyles protect people and buildings within a specific perimeter of land. If you research, which I never did before, if you research gargoyles, apparently they've been around for thousands of years.
Oh, certainly.
And obviously in New York and a lot of major cities, they're on the buildings. And
well,
they look like...
Of course, in all their European cities, they go back more than 1,000 years plus on buildings and churches.
Right. And you'd think, oh, like, why are these evil little devils on these buildings? They're protectors. They protect. I never knew that. Gargoyles protect people and buildings. If you research it, you'll see what I'm saying. So now, that was my first paranormal experience. I was 5. Did I die and this creature brought me back to life? I have no idea. Did this creature catch me as I was falling, save me, bring me to this couch? I have no idea. The 2 little girls I was with, everyone's asking me what happened to them. In the real world, if I had fallen to the ground and was unconscious, right, they were older than, they would have picked me up and brought me to my mommy's house. They would have, because they knew where I lived. They would have knocked on my mommy's door and said, "Oh, we're really sorry your son died," or gone to their mommy's house, which is across the street.
Something.
These 2 girls, Peter, they were nowhere to be found. Man, they bailed. They took off. These girls took off.
But you saw them again. I mean, they lived in the neighborhood. Continued to.
I lived there for another year. I must have seen them again. When you're 5, you don't say, hey, you guys, you remember last week when I died, and the gargoyle said, like, you should have stuck around. I was 5. I didn't say any word. Sure. My mother said, why didn't you tell me? I go, Mom, I was 5. What? I was supposed to say, yeah, Mom, I died. A gargoyle said, well, I'm 5. I probably came home and said, Mommy, can I have milk and cookies? I mean, right? Anyway, God, I swear to you, that's a true story. It's my first memory. Now, I was with Yvonne Smith all day Saturday. She said, Dan, that was not extraterrestrial creature. That was a true paranormal experience that you had. It was a paranormal creature from perhaps another dimension. And she said, in all my years and all my thousands of people, I've never heard a story like that. Yvonne Smith. I said, Yvonne, that's the greatest praise I've ever heard in my life coming from you. So I blew Yvonne Smith's mind with that story. What do you think, man? Is that gargoyle?
I don't know what to think, actually.
Neither do I. I have no idea.
What's the second story that you had in mind?
Okay. All right. So the second story, I think you'll probably relate to. All of us could relate to a little better. In the year 2003, I moved into a very beautiful apartment here in Beverly Hills with a new girlfriend. Her name was Brianna. She and I moved in together 2003. At the time, my kids would have been like 12 and 14. My son and my daughter would have been 12, 14. Okay, so I was dating this girl. We fell in love. We said, let's pool our resources. She made really good money. She worked for the Sopranos TV show. So
Wow.
I said, yeah, let's get a place. So we found this beautiful apartment, old 1920s building,
Great.
Beverly Hills, 2003. Okay, so she moved in a few days before I did from our previous respective apartments. So she's moving into this new apartment. I'm at my office in Hollywood. She calls me up. She goes, Danny, the weirdest thing just happened. I said, what? She goes, I'm in the new apartment. I'm walking around. The 3 moving men are at the truck outside on Doheny Drive on the street. And I'm walking around the new house and I heard, Joe? I said, what'd you say? She goes, I heard someone say, Joe, right behind me. I turned around. No one was there. And I said, wow, okay. I said, well, it must be one of the moving men. She goes, Dan, they're out at the truck. I'm looking at them. They're outside at the truck. They're not anywhere near me right now. Okay, that's number one. Okay, so she moved in. 3 days later, I moved in. Now we're living together, okay? The first night, I think we were there, I remember we were watching American Idol, the only time I've ever seen that show in my entire life. We're watching that, and I hear a thud in the dining room. I hear like a plop and a thud in the dining room.
And she hears it too.
I think so. It wasn't super loud, but it was odd. We were in the living room watching TV. I hear a plop thud in the next dining room next room. I get up. I walk to the dining room. We had a paper sack that had been there for a week filled with kitchen utensils and kitchen items. The top thing was a kitchen dish sink drain rack. You know, those things that have the slots.
Sure.
It had been at the top of this paper sack for a week. It's sitting there. Now, go in there, Peter. It had come out of the package, turned upside down, and it was 3 feet. It was 3 feet in front of the bag, upside down, for no apparent reason. And I said, Brianna, did we have an earthquake or did a wind blow through? Did I miss it? She goes, no. So I'm looking at this, Peter. I'm like, okay, how in God's name did you pop out of the sack? This is a little baby story. These stories get much, much better. So I put the thing back in the sack, okay? The next week, this story is a fantastic story. The next week, I'm in the living room. She's making dinner. We had a beautiful fireplace at this apartment. I had bought, those long decorative matchsticks, the real long matchsticks. I had bought a canister of those. They have the screw-on things at the caps. There were 50 in the carton. There were 50 of them. Now a normal person, Peter, would probably take 1 or 2 matches out gently with their finger, right? 1 or 2, and just extract it, right? I grabbed 50. I grabbed 50 matches by the end, and I pulled them out of this thing so quickly.
They lit.
They all lit. 50. I have 50 long matches in my hand. Peter, I'm now holding. I'm like Fred Flintstone with a torch. I'm a caveman. I have a torch, literally in a living room in Beverly Hills. I'm holding a torch. There's fire, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to singe off what little left hair that I have on my face. I'm going to singe it. So I'm staring at this torch, thinking, what the hell just happened? From the dining room, a dark bluish gray misty thing. I'm going to say, imagine Casper the Friendly Ghost without a face. Blue gray ghost flew in the air, flew from the dining room, I see it from my left eye, flew from the dining room. I look, I see it coming. It's coming toward me into the living room. I'm like, what the hell is that thing? And I swear to God, it took the torch from my hand. It pulled it out of my hand, and it threw the torch into the fireplace, which I should have done if I had been a normal person. I swear to you, Peter, this entity took it out and threw it into the fireplace. I swear to God, that's a true story. So I'm like, I was shaking. I'm like, what the hell was that thing? What the hell, right? Now, my girlfriend was in the kitchen, so she didn't see this event, but I sure did. because I felt it. I could feel it pull. It grabbed the torch and pulled it out of my hand. Okay, that's number 2. Okay, so first is Joe, then the kitchen sink thing, and then the fireplace thing. That's 3. Now there's more of these. Week later, my girlfriend and I are asleep, 3 a.m. We hear crash in the bathroom. Really, really loud. Crash. We go in the bathroom. She had a tall drinking glass of water that she kept next to the toothbrushes. Something had lifted it up off the shelf, picked it up, and smashed it on the floor as hard as it could go. It was in a million pieces. It didn't just like fall off the shelf. There was no earthquake. There was no wind. This thing had been lifted and smashed hard. There was a million pieces of glass on the floor. We're looking at it, and we're like, what? Huh? She goes, I have no idea. I go, how could this possibly have happened? We had no idea. Okay. Week after that, my son had his own room when he came to visit. My daughter they lived with their mother. I saw them on the weekends. My son is in his room. My daughter's in her room. Me and my girlfriend are in the master. Middle of the night, and my kids had their doors closed when they slept. Middle of the night, my son starts to scream, "Dad, there's someone in my room." And now, I don't know if you're a parent,
but I can guess the reaction.
When you're a parent and your son screams, "Dad, there's someone in my room," at 3 a.m, I flew out of my bed, man. I flew like horizontally. I flew across the room like Superman. I flew out of the bed. I ran. I opened the door. My son is shaking. He's like standing up, shaking.
How old is he at the moment?
I'm going to say he's 14.
Continue.
He's shaking. He goes, "Dad, someone's in my room." Now, there's no one in his room. Okay. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Dad, someone was knocking on the walls, all of the walls around my room, like in the 360." And then he showed me, it's like knock, 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 on all the walls, 4 walls, including I found this interesting. He had a glass TV, and this is before digital TVs. He had a glass TV. He said, "Dad, it even knocked on the glass screen of the TV." So it's knock, 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 all the way around 360. And he's shaking. Now, my son's not a liar, right? So I'm thinking, okay, this isn't good at all. So I said, "Jordan, look, it's 3 a.m. I totally believe you. Go back to sleep. We'll leave the door open, and hopefully everything will be fine, and we'll discuss this in the morning, okay?" "Fine, Dad." Okay, so he went back to sleep. We went back to sleep. The next morning, he's still sleeping. Me, my girlfriend, and my daughter get up. We're in the kitchen down the hall making breakfast. Then we hear slam, really loud. His bedroom door slams closed, hard. And he goes, "Dad!" I run down the hall. Peter, I go to open the door. I turn the knob. Something was pushing against from the other side for like maybe 5 seconds and didn't want me to come in. You know what I'm saying? Like I turned and tried to open the door. Something was resisting. And then I pushed it hard. It opened. My son is sitting up in bed. He goes, "Dad, something slammed the door." I go, "I know." He goes, "It wasn't me. I swear it wasn't me." I go, "Of course not. You're in bed. You didn't slam the door." So now this is absurd, right? This is just getting out of hand. Now here's this part that I don't recommend for everyone. We had a Ouija board. I had a Ouija board. I said to my family, I said, "We have to do a Ouija board and find out what the hell's going on in this house because something's happening here." I take the Ouija board out. We had a games closet. I took out the Ouija board. I set it up in the hallway on the floor. Me, my girlfriend, my son, my daughter, the 4 of us did the Ouija board. And the part that moves in the middle is called a planchette. So each of us put a hand on the planchette in the middle of the board. And here's the following is what happened. I led this session. I said, "Is there a ghost in my house?" The planchette said, "Yes." Right away, "Yes." "What's your name?" "Joseph." I go, "Joseph, where are you from?" Peter, this blew my mind. "Where are you from?" "Syria." My father's father, Joseph, was from Syria. My grandpa Joe was from Syria. Okay.
Right.
When this wrote Syria, I said, Grandpa Joe, is that you? Yes. I start crying. He died when I was 11 in 1967.
Mm.
We are now in the year 2003. I said, Grandpa Joe, is that you? Yes. So I'm crying, and my kids are crying too. I was so moved, I couldn't believe it. I said, Grandpa Joe, why are you here? And it wrote, Jordan. That's my son's name, Jordan. Jordan's right there. He's part of the game. I said, what do you want with Jordan? And it wrote, to teach, to teach. My grandfather taught Hebrew.
Oh my.
He was an Orthodox Jewish cantor in Brooklyn, very religious, a Jewish man.
Mm.
He died when I was 11. Of course, he never met my son,
Yes.
So he wants to teach my son, probably he wants to teach him Hebrew, I would think, because that's what he did. So I'm like just amazed. Then I asked another question, which I don't remember. And the Ouija board wrote a sentence, Peter. It wrote a sentence in Hebrew. Now, I wasn't proficient in Hebrew, so I stopped the game. I called my dentist in Beverly Hills. He happened to speak Hebrew. I said, Dr. Zeev, I'm doing a game, and I got this Hebrew sentence. What does this Hebrew sentence mean? And I read him the Hebrew words on the phone, and he said, it means I am a stranger here. So my grandfather, through the Ouija board, said to me, I am a stranger here. Okay, fine. Now, my girlfriend's upset. My kids are crying. I have like the hairs on my back standing up, and I'm like, I can't have my dead grandfather walking around this house. So I go back to the game. I go, Grandpa Joe, I love you. I miss you. I loved you very, very much. I go, but you're scaring the ass out of my family. I need you to leave. Please leave this house. And then the thing went yes. It went yes, Peter. And then that was it. I lived there for one more year, and nothing ever happened ever again. Now, if that wasn't my grandfather, it was now. And remember when my girlfriend heard Joe? Well, my grandfather was Joe. So now the question is, was he announcing himself to her, or was another spirit welcoming Joe into that house? Like, because you don't usually call out your own name, right? So, yeah. But it was Joe and Joseph. It was consistent. And as soon as I asked it to leave, never had another problem ever again. So that's the chapter called My Grandfather, the Poltergeist. True stories, all true stories.
You know, one of the things that I think is just natural to people is wanting to know more about the lives of public people. I'm sure it goes back to the beginnings of, civilization on some level, that people who we will, for lack of a better term, call famous, have a, not cult of celebrity, but we're just interested, some more than others. And, brushes with fame is just a great name for it. It's not name dropping if, this has been your life and you're simply relating, accounts. I have no real interest in learning about how nasty or small-minded, some people in public life, certainly in entertainment business, might be, as people. But I am interested in, actors and other people that you've interacted with over the decades who, either something happened or you had an exchange or a friendship or a warm acquaintanceship where you had an opportunity to observe them at a certain time, and you came away thinking, this is not just a talented person, but, positive superlatives. I'm going to ask you, can you tell us some stories or just relate some anecdotes about people, well-known people? And I guess that, here we're talking primarily actors, because this is the world that you've interfaced with for so long. They can be from the book or off your cuff. What would you like to start?
Friday night, a few nights ago, I produced a big event in Hollywood at a restaurant called Musso and Frank. It's the most famous restaurant in Hollywood. They
Wow.
turned 100. They turned 105 on Friday, and it was
Wonderful.
the event was to celebrate their 105th. And I spent much of the night hanging out with Danny Trejo and Harry Hamlin and Francis Fisher and Jolie Fisher and Diane Warren, and just met quite a few famous people are at this dinner.
Good fun.
Harry Hamlin, right? He comes up to me and he's like, he looks lost. And I go, "Hi, Harry, I'm Dan. I'm the publicist." He goes, "Dan." He goes, "Thank God you introduced yourself." He goes, "I don't know anyone here."
Oh,
Peter, me and Harry Hamlin are hanging out for like an hour. He's like my new best friend, Harry Hamlin. It's like the nicest
let's
guy,
remind
nicest guy on the
people
planet. Yeah, right.
who he is.
Okay. So, okay.
not
All right. So we're talking, and I go, "Harry, I was such a fan of L.A. Law.
Yeah.
L.A. Law. It was in the '80s. Wonderful show." And he goes,
Right.
"Dan," he goes, "Thank you," but he goes, he goes, "I've done like a million things since then." And I said, "Harry, I know, but I said, I'm old school, man. And to me, you'll always be the lawyer from L.A. Law." I mean, he was in Mad Men. He was in, I think, a Hercules. Big
Yes,
screen
very
Hercules.
definitely, and great fun in that.
Right. So just to give you a very, very current, I'm hanging with Harry Hamlin, and my daughter comes by, and he's talking to my daughter. So I'm like, "Okay, Harry Hamlin, nicest guy on the planet. Okay, got it, nicest guy on the planet." I gave him my card. He goes, "I'll give you an email." I'll go, "Okay, Harry Hamlin, nicest guy in the world." It goes. My thing with celebrities goes back to the early '70s when I was in high school. I had long hair. I played the drums. I lived in Asbury Park. Well, we all know who got famous in Asbury
The
Park.
boss, baby.
And his name was Bruce Springsteen. And I worked with Bruce Springsteen in 1973. I was 16 years old. My best friend and I were the stage managers at a rock concert hall. Bruce used to play there 2 years before Born to Run. He's not famous. And we did lights and stage crew for him on a couple of shows. And this is a great story. May he rest in peace. Clarence Clemens, Bruce's big black sax player.
Fabulous player.
He had just joined Bruce's band when I worked with Bruce. And after a show, and this is true, it's a great story. Clarence Clemens walks up to the bleachers, me and my best friend Steve. And Clarence goes, "Hey, you guys, we need stage crew to go on the road with us. We're leaving this weekend for Washington, D.C. Do you guys want to be our road crew?" To which I replied, "Clarence, we're 16. We don't drive, and I'm pretty sure our fathers want us to go to college." And he looked at us because he probably thought we were in our 20s. And he looked, 16? Okay. And he left. And then, of course, Bruce Springsteen became the Beatles, 2 years later.
Sure.
So I have very, very funny stories. When I met Meryl Streep, I was so nervous. I called her Carla because the woman standing next to me was my friend Carla.
Oh, geez.
I pulled a dyslexic. It was an incredible thing. It's a photo shoot for Meryl Streep and Kevin Costner. I hung out with Kevin, nicest guy in the world, and Meryl Streep was about an hour late. She comes in an hour late, dressed head to toe in white. She literally looked like an angel from heaven. And she had just won an Oscar for Sophie. She's the most famous woman on the planet.
Sophie's Choice, right.
Okay. So at the time, she's literally the most famous woman on the planet.
Well, famous actor anyway.
Yeah, next to Queen of England. I mean, really, one of the top women you could think of. So she comes in late, and then there's a line, man. There's like 25 people in line. The heads of Warner Brothers, the heads of ABC, my friend Carla, and then Schmucky Dan. I was literally the last person in this line. And she did like the Queen of England line, Meryl Streep, and she went down. It was the Queen of England, man. And she's coming down. "Hi, I'm Mr. Smith. I'm the head of Warner Bros." "Oh, nice to meet you, Miss Streep. So she's coming down. And now Meryl Streep has never meant anything to me ever, never once. I admire her talent, but I'm not a fan, right? Not a fan. So she's coming down slowly coming down. And I'm thinking, what do I say to Meryl Streep? What do I say to Meryl? Like, what do I say? What do I say? What do I say? I just got, I psyched myself out. You know? Then she comes down to my friend Carla, right next to me. Carla goes, Miss Streep, my name is Carla from Warner Brothers. It's so nice to meet you. Shake hands, right? Meryl Streep comes to me, schmucky Dan. I'm literally the last person in the line. I shake Meryl Streep's hand. I'm shaking. Carla, it's so nice to meet you. My name is Dan. I'm a publicist. Carla, I called Meryl Streep to her name, Carla, while shaking her hand. So she goes like this, like remember the RCA Victor dog? Like, what? She turned her head, pulled her hand out, and just slowly walked away. And my friend Carla goes, Dan, I feel so bad for you. I go, why? She goes, you just called Meryl Streep Carla. I said, I did? I don't remember. I didn't even remember doing that. And then the rest of the day, Meryl Streep wanted nothing to do. She wouldn't talk to me the rest of the day. I mean, my book, Flirting with Fame, I have hundreds and hundreds. You know, I knew Jerry Seinfeld before he was famous. I worked with Bruce before he was famous. I went to college with Howard Stern before he was famous. I have this, I'm not going to say it's paranormal, but it's like I was meant to be in the entertainment business. Do you remember the Woody Allen movie Zelig? One of my favorite movies.
Oh, yes, very much so. Yeah.
Right. You know, Zelig is like, he's like, Babe Ruth is like at the batter's box, right? And Woody Allen as Zelig is the next guy up, or like Hitler's doing a speech and Zelig, Woody Allen, is like a Nazi, like right behind Hitler. He's always at the right place at the right time next to famous people. That's been my whole, since I'm 15 years old. That's why I called my book Flirting with Fame, because I've interacted with and hung with hundreds of very, very famous people since the age of 50. For whatever reason, it just seemed to be lined up for me to have accomplished that. And I'm very grateful I was able to make a career out of it.
So again, any great actors that you've met, that you've observed, maybe a cut above other people's behavior in terms of thoughtfulness, or particularly observant, or
nice stories.
Well, yes,
nice stories?
Absolutely.
Okay. I represented Jay Leno for 2 years when he first got the Tonight Show. I was his publicist.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, his manager was a very evil, dark, horrid man. Horrid. And all that manager did, and he died shortly thereafterwards, and I have to say he deserved it. All he did was curse people. It's all he did was curse people. Meanwhile, Jay Leno was, in real life, the man you see on TV, the nicest guy on the planet. So I would be backstage at the Tonight Show in Jay Leno's dressing room with Jay Leno and this PRICK of a manager. And this manager would be cursing me and screaming at me and this and that. And Jay Leno, Dan. And Jay Leno's in his underwear. He's in his underwear getting dressed for the Tonight Show, literally. Hey, Dan, yeah. And so he would like put his arm around, Dan, yeah, don't worry about him. Yeah, he likes you. Everything's fine. Yeah, we love you. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, Dan, yeah, you're a good guy. Don't worry about it, Dan. Yeah, everything's fine. Yeah. So it would be like, it would be like a dog, like, here, boy, good boy. And then you kick the dog really hard. And then, oh, come on, boy. It's okay. Come on. The dog comes again and he gets kicked. So between Jay, the nice guy, and then his manager, the bad cop, I had like whiplash between the two. That went on for 2 years. So anyway, Jay Leno, nicest guy on the planet. Probably the most loving, warm, kind thing I ever saw a celebrity do, ever. Do you know who Dee Wallace is? Actress Dee Wallace?
Sure.
Okay, the mother from E.T.
Fine actress.
The mother from E.T., the mother from Cujo, and the sexy TV reporter from The Howling. Okay. She's one of my best friends. She's been one of my best friends for 35 years. In the 80s, I was the publicist for her TV show called The New Lassie. They resurrected that Fakakta show. So she was the mom for 3 years. So she and I became very, very good friends, and we're still very good friends. During that period in the 80s, my then wife got pregnant with my daughter. And in the early stages of my then wife's pregnancy, my then wife got very, very ill from being pregnant. She couldn't eat, she couldn't drink water, she couldn't get out of bed. All she did was throw up, and she was like dying basically. I had lunch once with Dee Wallace in that period. She goes, Dan, how you doing? I go, I'm not doing good. I go, my wife's in bed, pregnant with my second child, and she can't eat, she can't drink, she can't get out of bed. Dee goes, Dan, she grabbed my hand. She goes, Dan, the exact same thing happened to me when I was pregnant with my daughter. And then she goes, what's your wife's name? And I told her. She goes, what's your address? I told her. She goes, I'm sending my acupuncturist healer to your house, to your house. I'm going to pay him to cure your wife. And Peter, this guy came to our house maybe 5 or 6 times. And after the 5 or 6 times, he healed my wife, and she was totally fine. And thank God my daughter's totally healthy. Dee Wallace helped me give birth to, deliver my daughter. How's that?
That's wonderful.
And last year, my daughter and Dee and I did a book event. Dee introduced me, and my daughter hugged her and said, Dee, you helped me come into the world. And they were crying, the two women.
Beautiful.
So that's by far my most wonderful. Nothing touches that one.
Dan, of course, we associate a lot of well-known actors with the paranormal or UFO-related stories because they've played roles in films that deal with that subject, and sometimes it really sticks. Have any, well-known people, actors that you have interacted with, shared stories about paranormal experiences in their lives, or more recently, UFO sighting or anything like that? Has that ever come up with folks that you've dealt with?
That's a great question. So that goes to my group, Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. That's a very good segue, man. That'd be perfect. As you know, and perhaps some of your audience doesn't know, but after I wrote my book, After They Came last year, I became very good friends with Steve Bassett, who was the first lobbyist ever in Washington to lobby for disclosure, 1996, almost 30
years. And whose Paradigm Research Group has done such good work for such a long time, and working against excessive UFO secrecy.
Right, exactly. He and Greer and Bassett likes to include Spielberg. He calls it the 3 Stevens: Stephen Greer, Stephen Bassett, Steven Spielberg. He goes, we're the 3 Stevens that are trying to move the world forward with disclosure. Anyway, so Stephen and Bassett and I became very, very good friends. Last summer, we had lunch in Hollywood. He told me his life story. I told him my life story. He said, what can we do together? I looked at the ceiling. I looked at Stephen. I said, we're going to create the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. We shook hands. We didn't know what the hell it was. We had no idea what it was. Peter, it was 3 words. It was literally 3 words. He invited me to Contact last summer. I was his roommate. He introduced me to Richard Dolan and Nick Pope and Ron Janix and Ron Jane. He introduced me to everyone right, George Norrie, everyone right down the line. And we said, we're going to create the Hollywood. We didn't know what it was. We really didn't know. It wasn't a company. It wasn't a website. We didn't have a logo. We had 3 words. Every person we invited, Peter, starting with George Norrie, he grabbed my shoulder. He goes, Danny, I want to be member number 1. I said, George, you're member number 1. So that's how we created the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. We launched last fall officially, so we're November 1st will be 1 year old exactly. Now, to answer your question, there's a movie TV star named Thomas Jane. Tall, good-looking guy.
I know who he is.
Okay, a lot of people don't know him by name, but they
recognize him immediately, though, from his roles.
He was the Punisher, so everyone knows the Punisher.
No, everybody doesn't, but
well, a lot of people that I know. Oh, the Punisher. He was in The Mist, a Stephen King movie called The Mist. He was in The Expanse TV series recently. He was in a movie called The Sweetest Thing with Cameron Diaz. He was in The Thin Red Line.
That was a great film.
He's done a lot, but he's a kind of movie star. First of all, he's very humble, and he's very not full of himself. Okay, now to answer your question. Thomas Jane was one of the first people to join our alliance. In November, he came to our launch event, and since then, he and I have become very, very good friends. I have my own podcast, as you know, on the
Of
Un-X
course,
Network. As
on
the
this
Un-X
network.
Network, you and I are colleagues and peers. My show is called Live from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight. It's live every Thursday. A few months ago, I interviewed Thomas Jane, the movie star, on my show. Now, Thomas is writing a book called A Human's Guide to Visiting Aliens. He's been working on it for 8 years. He's currently editing it, and he tells me that probably early next year he's going to publish it on Amazon. And I'll probably be the publicist for that book. So I interviewed him. I'm going to say it was probably March or April this year. And as we're talking, I said, Thomas, everyone knows, your movies and your TVs. He's done quite a few Stephen King movies. He was married to Patricia Arquette, who is very famous from the show Medium. That was his ex-wife. So I said, we all know you, such as tell me about your childhood and how'd you get into acting and this, that, the other. So he told me those things. And then right before this is really funny, right before the break that I had to take, I go, Thomas, now you're writing a book, A Visitor's Guide to a Human's Guide to Visiting Aliens. What inspired you to write that book? And he goes, oh, Dan, something happened in my house, and I can't talk about it. I can't talk about it. And Peter, he's like looking down. I go, Thomas, what do you mean? Something remarkable happened. It wasn't good. I'm still processing it. It was 15 years ago. I can't talk about it. And he was like, I'm not gonna. And just as I was almost getting him to talk about it, I had to take my break for my commercials. So I'm like, oh man, that couldn't have been worse, because I was luring him out, right? Do my break, come back. He goes, Dan, here's what I'll tell you. I have had insomnia my whole life. He lives in Silver Lake near Hollywood. He said I was in my bed, tossing and turning. I got up, I went downstairs. I'm laid on the couch in my living room. Something came into my living room, and it was dark and not pleasant. And that's as far as I can tell you. I can't, I'm not going to talk about it. And he was very, very upset, right? So now I'm thinking, did he get abducted? I mean, something bad, Peter, man. So then I go, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to push you. I said to you, by any chance, do you have any other stories? Then he popped up and he goes, yeah, I just remembered it. One I can tell you. So here's to answer your question. When Thomas Jane was 8 years old, he was in Montana with his father and his grandfather, and they were visiting Montana to go fishing. He said, we loved to go fishing as a family, the 3 generations. His father and his grandfather, they woke him up like at 4 a.m, dark. They get in this truck, and the truck had an open sunroof. Keep that in mind. They get in a truck. They're driving through Montana, 4:30 in the morning, pitch black. It goes pitch black. His grandfather was driving. His father was in the front seat. He's in the back seat. They're driving through Montana in the dark, middle of the night, to go fishing. He goes, along the way, Thomas Jane, looked up through the sunroof, and there was an orange UFO. I don't remember the shape. An orange UFO hovering above his grandfather's car and following them along. He said it was very rusty orange color, very clearly a UFO. It had full shape. He knew what it was. He looked up, and he's 8 years old, and he was excited. Sure. So he goes, Grandpa, Dad. This is kind of similar to my story. Your dad, as you stop the car, right? He goes, Grandpa, Papa, whatever he calls it, Pop, Grandpa, Dad, there's a UFO above us. Let's stop the car and get out and let's look. There's a UFO. Peter, he said his grandfather and his father, he said it was like their brains had been switched off. They kept driving. They didn't look at him. They didn't turn to speak to him, to respond to his words. They just were driving as though they were paralyzed, he said. And he's going, oh my God, there's this UFO is doing a show just for me. And why can't my beloved, dad and my grandpa wake up? He said they were switched off. After a few minutes, the UFO took off, vanished. And then the two men turned back and said, "Yeah, Thomas, did you say something?" He goes, "Yeah, there was a UFO." UFO? No, we didn't. No, there's no UFO. We didn't see UFO. So I said, "Thomas, that was a show just for you. That was a communication meant just clearly for you." So that's the best UFO celebrity story that I personally know about.
Wow. That's pretty intense. And it's not an unfamiliar scenario to me as, B-movie as it sounds. This is part of the way it is in events like this. Or, well, I don't know, but good for him for sharing that with you.
Yeah. I was glad. I said, "Thomas, that's a terrific story." I'm so glad because he wasn't going to offer it. He felt bad because he knew he was bumming me out by not telling me the dark story. So he pulled that one. I said, "Thomas, thank you so much for sharing that story with me." So now I think he feels more comfortable talking about UFOs in public.
Yeah. Before we move on, any other anecdotes you want to share from this particular book before we move on?
Oh boy, God, let's see. Well, Sid Caesar was he was very unpleasant.
Oh dear.
Very unpleasant man.
Comic genius.
Milton Berle, very unpleasant. but when they were so I knew Milton Berle and I knew Steve Allen and I knew Sid Caesar. I worked with all these like legends. These guys in private were kind of like on the dark and not pleasant side, let's say. But Peter, as soon as you put them in front of an audience or a camera, or like Sid Caesar, I used to drive him to do Larry King. We used to do Larry King interviews together, and me, Larry King, and Sid Caesar hanging out. And I'm like, I'm in my 30s. I'm like, God, I'm with two icons. Like, where do I come to be with these two icons, right? But anytime these guys were in front of people at a microphone or a TV camera, they're funny, they're witty, like this, they're making people laugh. Milton Berle with his cigar, and they're just this, that. And then when the lights and cameras goes off and they're talking, Dan, I wasn't prepared to do that. And, you should have told me, Dan. You should have told me, man. You should have told me that. I wasn't. What am I supposed to perform just because I'm Sid Caesar? I'm supposed to perform. And I'm like, okay, Sid, sorry, man. Next time I'll. So I mean, I have lots of weird. I've urinated with Sylvester Stallone. I've urinated with Robert Wise many, many times. Every time we kept peeing together, we would say, we really have to stop meeting this way every single time.
Robert Wise is, for me, a hero of mine. Not only was he the director of was it the first Star Trek movie?
Well, that was the crappy one, but he did The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Well, he was the editor on The Day the Earth Stood Still. Which
he was the director.
Oh, the director on The Day the Earth Stood Still, exactly.
He was the editor, I think, of Citizen Kane, is what you're thinking.
That's exactly right. And he, like Wells at the time, was in his 20s. Amazing.
I worked. My very first job in Hollywood ever was in 1982 at the American Film Institute, which is a Hollywood college. It's a filmmaking college. And Mr. Wise was one of the professors there.
Wonderful.
And to imagine taking filmmaking from Robert Wise, right? Now, I was an administrative assistant, so all I did was type there. And Mr. Wise's office was down the hall. But Peter, every time I had to pee, Robert Wise had to pee. And me, I'm 24 years old. I have $6, and literally I have $6 in the world. And I'm peeing with Robert Wise, an icon, a Hollywood icon. And every time one of us would say, we simply have got to stop meeting this way. So I always thought that
is a unique Hollywood story.
It is. I peed with Jerry. What was his name? The TV show, Jerry Springer.
Oh, God.
I'm in a men's room. Me and him were peeing, and I thought, say something funny to myself. So I go, Jerry, as we're peeing, Jerry. And he looks at me and goes, really? Is that the best you can do? Peter, you have to read Flirting with Fame, because I have the most fakaked stories about me with celebrities that are just so off the wall. Man.
Speaking about fame in terms of the world of greater world of UFO studies?
That photo cost me $50. That was all of 45 seconds of time.
With the
It was
great Eric von Däniken.
It was Alien Con 2023. My book, After They Came, had come out 2 days before this
Oh
event.
my.
I had a booth there to promote my book, After They Came.
That's well
And-
spent $50 as far as
And
promotion goes.
and I had to stand in line. I paid $50. I said to my daughter, she was manning the booth, I said, I have to meet Eric von Däniken. It has to happen. She goes, go ahead, Dad, go. So I paid my money. I walk in, I handed him the book. He holds it, Peter. He goes, After They Came. I haven't read this one yet. I go, Eric, it came out yesterday. So that's probably why.
You gave him a copy, I hope.
So he goes, come on, we have to do the photo. So we did the photo. And then after I said, Eric, I wrote a special inscription to you. I'd like to gift this book to you. It would mean a lot if you'd read it someday. Yeah, sure. I got it again. So then he throws it to his assistant across the hall, Craig or Carl. Here, Carl, add this to the pile. Peter, there's a pile, man. There's my book is like one of 300 books. There's a pile. Everyone's given the guy books. But anyway, it was 45 seconds. I got to meet the man. Yeah.
I've only met him once, and that was, I think, in 1999 when I used one of his lectures for the very end of the video era, right before went to DVDs. Myself and Antonio Huneeus, my earliest colleague in the work and a great ufologist, the three of us got very drunk in a hotel lobby after doing our business. I couldn't tell you the hotel to save my life, except that it was, I think, in the East 30s. And I, as a lecturer, I've rarely seen such dynamism. And the guy's built like a refrigerator, and he does not suffer fools lightly. He is quite a remarkable guy, and only sold about 400+ million books in his life.
Oh, the guy's. Listen, he's the grandfather of he and Zechariah Sitchin are the grandfathers of modern day ufology. I think Zechariah Sitchin got lost in the shuffle, but they were contemporaries, late 60s.
Yes, Eric was is a German Swiss journalist originally when he began in the mid 60s with the legendary Chariots of Fire. But
Chariots of the Gods.
Chariots of the Gods, right? That's confusing, with a very good English Academy Award-winning movie,
right?
But Zechariah Sitchin was, of course, a Sumerian scholar, and I did have quite a nice friendship for quite some time. Very decent guy who worked right up until he was 90. We are coming into our last few minutes, Dan, and I want to make sure that folks know where they can find everything that you're doing. And I know, of course, like most things, we go to Amazon. Your 4 books in print are Flirting with Fame, After They Came, My Paranormal Life, and the one I haven't seen, 5, a novella. You want to tell us a little bit about this as we head out?
Sure. And then also my sex book, Carrots, which you mentioned. I actually have 5. I do have 5 books. The sex book is very controversial, and I got a lot of flack. It's something I felt after I became undepressed. Literally, yes. After I became undepressed, I wrote that book.
Yeah.
So yeah, all my books are on Amazon.com. If you want more information about me and the books, DanHararyAuthor.com, DanHararyAuthor.com. My newest book, 5, is a story about a serial killer in 1880s London who is a famous actor who murders women at night, and then he dies, and 100 years later, he gets reincarnated, and he becomes the biggest pop music star in the world. And he also is a serial killer. Now, how did I come up with this? I walk 5 miles every other day through Beverly Hills, and I just kept thinking 5, F-I-V-E, 5. I love that's such a good word, 5. So I came up with 5. It's also my 5th book. And Peter, as I told you, I worked with Bruce Springsteen when I was a kid, and I thought, here's the thought. I'm like, what if Bruce Springsteen was secretly a serial killer, like the most famous rock star in the world, right? He's playing Bruce, people crying, hugging, crying, and then he puts on this cloak with the hood, and he drives around and he murders women like Jekyll and Hyde, right? And I just thought, what if Bruce Springsteen was a serial killer? So in 5, the modern day guy is the world's biggest pop star, but he inherits the soul of the first guy. So it's a serial killer who gets reincarnated every 100 years. That's the story.
Thank you, my friend. We are out of time. I just want to remind folks again, XCon conference coming up October 11th through 13th in Springfield, Missouri. And register now. Dan, a pleasure. Wishing you all the best. And to all of you guys out there, stay well, stand up for what you believe in, and be kind when possible. See you next week.
Thank you.